zooming.
Excuse me, which way to the interview?
That way, I think.
Oh, Prime Minister!
Oh, hello!
Day, the 25th of November, 2010.
Good morning and welcome to the Today Show. There's no getting around this one for the federal government. When you introduce an election to the Australian public in 10 months' time, it's obvious that someone has screwed up. Tonight, we will be putting the pressure to our leaders to tell us exactly how and why they made the decisions they made. We have been able to get both Julia and Tony on the show tonight, and we will be hearing both sides of the story. Welcome Prime Minister and Mr Abbott.
Lisa, Tony,
Julia?
Tony.
So Prime Minister, I see you're in a boot.
Oh yes, I was in India the other day, and you know India's soil, lovely, moist and rich, not like our outback. And my high heel got stuck and I did some damage.
Geez.
Yes.
Have you put a soil tax on yet, Miss Gillard?
Anyway, moving on. So today we have selected a number of topics for us to discuss. Topics such as inflation, interest and unemployment rates, the upcoming election and the Australian dollar.
Well, Lisa, sounds like a pretty jam-packed segment.
Yes, we have had a lot of requests from our viewers.
Well, they do deserve to know the truth, Julia.
Moving on, Tony.
Anyway, getting on with it. Where shall we start?
The election sounds like a good place, doesn't it, Julia?
Yes, we can start there. So Julia, you have already proposed a date for the country to go to poll. Where will this be?
Well, Lisa, I have put it to the Australian public that we will go back to the booths and vote for who we want to run our country. I believe that the Australian public deserve to go back to the polls. A lot has changed since I was elected in 2009. We've had many change in our education system, like the Gonski report. We've built a stable society where communities can thrive and develop in a great nation. Since Labor has come into power in 2007 with Kevin 07, my good friend Kevin, there has been full employment, low interest rates and attainable inflation, and I'm certain the Australian public will want a party like the Labor Party to lead them into the future.
Well then, Julia, if Labor is so fantastic, explain how our $180 million in debt is helping our economy.
Well, Tony, can you explain to me what your party is doing to actively reduce the boat people?
Okay, moving on. Tony, it is inevitable that by the Labor Party setting the polling date so far away, there would be questions and controversies attached. Do you want to talk about this?
It's absolutely ridiculous, Lisa, and something that Julia and her government should be held accountable for. It's ridiculous. Why on earth would you call an election so far away? And especially with our country in the state that it is. National debt, asylum seekers, the carbon tax, the people of Australia are confused and being rorted by the system. I believe the faster we go to the polls, the faster I can start picking up the pieces.
And Julia, you recently visited the western suburbs.
Yes.
According to a quote, you wanted to show the people in the western suburbs that you wanted to be just like them.
Yes.
Now, we know your official campaign for the election hasn't officially started, but this visit is undoubtedly part of it.
Ha, Lisa, this is not part of my campaign. I often mingle with the public. People can often feel the government is not their friends, that we're high powers, but I always make a conscientious effort to let people know that I am just another ordinary Australian. No, this is not my campaign. That will come later on in the year. But if you did your research, you would know that I often do public outings, quite often in fact. People need to know I am one of them, which is why I am confident people will be voting for me come election day.
Thank you, Julia and Tony, for sharing your views on your new campaign. Now, a further topic related to Australia during the 21st century is our unemployment rates. Statistics show that the unemployment rate remained unchanged from December to January 2013 at 5.4%. The Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that the number of people increased by 10,400 people in January. Could you explain further?
Yes, Lisa, of course I can explain all my actions. The increase in employment was driven by an increased part-time employment rate. There's now approximately 3.5 million part-time employed members in Australia's society. Pretty impressive if you ask me. The Labor Party has guided the unemployment and has helped them decrease the unemployment rate.
Yes, but Julia, the Labor government is also responsibility for the significant decrease of full-time employees. There was a decrease of 10,000 people. This is a vast...
Tony, you are not getting to the point. Within a couple of months, there will be an increase of approximately 20,000 employed people in Australia. This was part of my campaign to improve the lives of the fellow Australians I live with. As you can see, the Labor Party has obviously achieved this. I don't know what you're baffling on about.
So Julia, you claim that the Labor Party has improved the unemployment rate, which is true. However, the increase was only due to part-time employment. Tony stated that there was an obvious loss of full-time employed people. Another point that has not been made by either of us, is that there was an increase in the unemployed by up to 2,000 people.
Exactly. Julia, you and the Labor Party need a reality check. Yes, you have improved the part-time employment rates, but look at the other aspects of this issue. Are you going to do anything about this?
Well, Tony, if it makes you happy, I will. Now, Tony, you and I both know that the carbon tax is benefiting Australia.
Revenue raiser.
And back to interest rates, shall we? Julia, do you feel that as a government, you are doing everything to help the National Bank pull down the interest rates to help our fellow Australians?
Well, yes, actually, I am confident, just like any other Australian, that we will get through this. We as a government need to use the national interest rates. We change them often to help offset inflation and due to taxes, etc., etc. We as a government do look at all the factors. We look at what Australians are going through and what needs to be done. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made. If we as a government are struggling to do our job, then yes, sometimes we make tough decisions. But what people need to realise is that they will reap the benefits in the end. If we change the interest rates to benefit the government, then they will be confronted with a country with its functionality is brilliant, a place that they all want to live in.
Yes, I agree with Julia. Sometimes governments, both in and out of power, have to compromise different aspects in order to fix something that needs more attention. But I feel that as the opposition leader, there is more we can do, instead of robbing from the families of the poor, Julia.
Tony?
The value of the Australian dollar compared to a US dollar is quite high at the moment. Miss Abbott, would you like to comment on this?
Sure. In the last month, the Australian dollar has gone through a period of appreciation, which is when the value of the Australian dollar rises compared to the US. For quite some time now, our dollar has been high. I mean, this could be a good thing if you listen to Miss Gillard, but as usual, you're just being fed lies.
I never lie.
But as the opposition leader, it's my job to show you, as the Australian public, the truth. A high Australian dollar means our exporting Australian businesses are going to suffer because they will not be competitively priced. This is on top of the export tax and all other costs incurred by exporters. Our mining sector contributes over 5.6% of the Australian gross domestic product and is adversely affected by the high Australian dollar. Miss Gillard, your government is not looking after the sectors that help look after our Australian economy.
Miss Gillard?
Tony, what you need to understand is that the high Australian dollar is absolutely brilliant for the average Australian because imports, travel, shares all become cheaper. This means that all the working class families get a better deal thanks to the Labor Party. It's always thanks to the Labor Party. It is cheaper for them to buy groceries, to buy clothes, to buy other items which they need. If they want to travel, they can travel and get a better bang for their buck overseas. Overseas shares become cheaper for Australians to purchase and are worth more to sell. Tony, our government is not fast about looking after multinational corporations that don't care about the average Australian. Rather, it chooses to focus on the people who matter the most to the economy, the Australian consumer. If the Australian dollar was low, the average Australian would have a harder time making ends meet, providing food and necessities for the family, and our economy would crash. The Labor government does not want this, which is why we have worked so hard for our high Australian dollar.
Thank you, Ms Gillard and Tony, for your input on the Australian dollar. Inflation has serious consequences for all sectors of the economy, and many people suffer more times of inflation than others. Could you give us some examples on the effects of inflation?
Well, one of the main aspects of inflation could be wage rates, which are the workers whose main incomes do not keep up with the rising prices. The real income decreases. Other consequences of inflation is fixed incomes. Fixed incomes is when social welfare recipients, for example, when superannuation funds in their income increasingly slowly. Their standards of living may fall due to the fact they are no longer able to afford the necessities like goods and services. Inflation also affects business profits, and some people do not know whether to spend or save. And some businesses make less while others sell more. Usually they are not sure whether to expand now or to prepare for the future or to reduce production. This is something the Labor Party fights to protect the welfare of my fellow Australians from.
And you can't forget that inflation makes it difficult to maintain financial security. Now, Julia, I disagree that the Labor Party is preventing inflation from the Australian society. The Liberal Party would do a much better job for our citizens, and you and your party need to wake up to reality.
The inflation rate in Australia was recorded at 2.20% towards the end of 2012. Inflation rate in Australia is recorded by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. From 1951 until 2012, inflation rate in Australia averaged 5.29%. It reached an all-time high of 23.9% in December of 1951, and the lowest percentage recorded was minus 1.3%, reached in June of 1962. Do you believe the Labor has maintained Australian interest rates, keeping them low, Tony?
They may have somewhat maintained inflation rates, but I wish to make no further comment.
Well, if that's what makes you happy, Tony, then I guess it's going to have to be that one.
So thank you for joining us this morning on the Today Show.
I hope we've enlightened the Australian public.
Well, Julia, the Australian public does deserve to know the truth.
Next, after the break, we will be covering topics such as why lipstick does not stay on middle-aged women.
Oh, how interesting. I need to watch
See
that.
you soon.
And we all choose them together.
Dun, 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 dun. Yes, so Tony.